Alright, time for the comment response for should World of Warcraft have a cash shop and or microtransactions? In the original video, I said yes, but, caveat to it, as long as it doesn't turn into the really bad cash shops that I explained in the video. And after reading your guys' comments, honestly, a lot more people agreed with my opinion than I thought. I 100% assumed everyone to just tear into me about how terrible, the cash shop is and stuff. Surprisingly, not too much of that. Obviously, there was still some. But from a lot of those, they were like one-word responses, just like no. Or people who obviously didn't watch the whole video. And I say that because they were bringing up points in their arguments, points that I had already covered in the video, and they were bringing up those points as if I'd never heard of them. Like big gotcha moments, like, bet you didn't think of this. And I was like, yes, I did. It was in the video if you'd watched it. Or it fell into the camp of, I'm talking about really long replies, of course, where they typed out something really long, vehemently against the cash shop, but I couldn't really understand what they were saying. Like, a lot of the sentences didn't really make sense, so I didn't read those ones. But I still got some good comments to read. I like to read ones that are disagreeing with my opinion and talk about them. So let's get into it. First one. I think I got a good mix of both, kind of. Actually, no, I think I got a couple more positive ones here than negatives. And I'm trying to read less comments in these videos so that they're not like over half an hour long anymore. So first one. Here's my take, microtransactions in WoW. I'm fine with it. I don't care for it. And until WoW starts literally selling you weapons and armor for raiding and PvP, like so many other MMOs, that's where I put my foot down. Until that happens, I don't really care if Blizzard has a new mount in the mount store, because I only really ride one mount based on the character I'm choosing for the focus on the day. Yeah, that was basically my thing. Like, the mount shop as it is now, I think is harmless and fine. But, if they do start selling weapons and armor for raiding and PvP in the cash shop, like the best stuff even, then I'll start joining the crowd of, no microtransactions. Because in the original video, I talked about a couple of other games I play where they do have really terrible monetization models like that. And I don't like those models in those games. I guess that's it. It's like, I agree with him, and he added a couple of more points to my thing. Next one. But Little Rag can be used as a cooking fire. That's useful because it doesn't have a cooldown. For those of you who don't know, Little Ragnaros is a pet on the cash shop, and it has a special distinction where it can just straight up be used as a cooking fire. So if you summon the pet, you can cook on it. And, without having to set down a cooking fire or go to a fire, it allows you to use it as a cooking fire. There's also a pet in game called Perry, who does the same thing, and came out at the same time as Little Ragnaros, and you can just buy it off the auction house. I currently sell them myself. They're like one of the pets I create through like daily cooldowns on my Goblin Hunter. Goblin Engineer. The fact that he's a hunter is irrelevant to that. And I usually sell them for about 15k each. So yeah, they're kind of pricey, but that's because they're useful as a cooking fire. And I don't know if there's any other pets, but there is a pet you can get in-game that can also be used as a cooking fire. But also, you can convert gold into a WoW token to get Little Ragnaros anyway. So, I just wanted to mention that. Perry exists, does the same thing. So, Little Ragnaros being a cooking fire, that's not an advantage you can't already get in game with another pet. Okay, next question. Or next comment. First of all, I do not think a sub-based game should have a cash shop. However, I think the cash shop in WoW isn't as bad as people make it out to be. The game has a much more dire problem that we should focus on, like the lack of tier sets. Also, now you can buy them with gold, so it's not as bad as it used to be back in the day. However, there are two kinds of arguments surrounding those. The first one being, I get that mount for just playing the game, and that casual has to pay for it with IRL cash. Well, that's nice for me. While the second one goes like, God damn it, it took me so long to farm out the gold and that guy can just buy it with $20. Come on. Now, both of these arguments are right. There is no definite answer. It really depends on what kind of person you are. The thing with cosmetic microtransactions is that them being good or bad depends on a lot of factors. If the money is used to develop the game, then to be honest, that's not bad. However, if it goes straight into the wallet of Bobby Cratchit's fat wallet, well then we have a problem. Charity sales are also fine. Also, most people didn't bat an eye at the cash shop in Legion. It's only now in BFA that everyone goes on the forums to complain about irrelevant bullshit instead of giving constructive criticism. Cosmetic microtransactions are the opposite of having good graphics. If the game is good, nobody cares. As a side note, I want to mention that Hearthstone has seen a bit of more microtransactions since Boomsday, and there hasn't been a free hero skin for like a year, and I'm fine with the purchasable hero skins. After all, it's a free-to-play game, but I want some free stuff as well to balance things out. When they did the Arthas Paladin hero unlock, it was one of the best things they've done. Defeating the unique challenges for every class was truly amazing, and I just wish they would do more of that. Okay, so this talks about a lot. Let's go over all of these things real quick. The first one is basically describing the same scenario, but talking about how that same scenario can be completely different depending on if you're negative or like your mindset about it. So one of the things could be, I play this game normally and I make a lot of gold, so I can get a cash shop mount with gold easily. That's good for me. Other people who don't play as much as I do have to pay real money for it. Wow, those idiots. They're so dumb. I'm smarter than them because I have gold in game. Fair. People who play a lot, making gold is honestly not that hard. It's just most people, you have to know how to do it though. It's kind of like, making YouTube videos isn't that hard. But just because you have to know what to do, you have to make the right things. There's so much more that goes into it. That's kind of like gold making. Technically, the work you actually do isn't hard, but the knowledge of how to do it correctly is the thing that takes a long time to get. And if you have that knowledge, you can make tons of gold, millions. You can buy everything on the cash shop and not bat an eye. And there's plenty of people in game who do that. And then on the other end, there's, god damn it, I farmed for gold for so long, and this guy is able to just buy the same amount I got by just paying 20 real life dollars. That is cheap. And it's like, yeah, that's there's two arguments. They're both talking about the same thing. Not two arguments, two sides of the same thing. One of them's like, I get an advantage because I have tons of gold and I can just buy the stuff. And the other one's like, oh, I had to farm all that gold and someone can just buy it off the, for $20. That's not fair to me. And both of these arguments are right. There is no definite answer. It really just depends what kind of person you are. Yeah, that's true. That's basically just agreeing with you. Not much more to add to that. I just had to reframe it to kind of, make it easier to understand. The next part is the thing with cosmetic microtransactions. This is basically talking about where the money goes to. And I've seen this as a point of contention. In my opinion, my own personal opinion, since I have a YouTube channel, it's basically a business similar to running a video game. I put out videos that entertain people, and I make money through ads that are put on the video, as well as a couple of other things, like Patreon and donations and stuff. And since that money has to come from my fan base, because I can't make money unless people are watching the ads or, giving me money through donations and Patreon. So, the people who give the money feel as if they're not entitled, that's not the right word for it, feel as if they should have a say in where that money is being spent. And if it's not spent in the place they want it to be spent, then they feel as if they shouldn't be earning that money in the first place. When really, since I have a similar business model that pays my bills, it's more like, I put out the product and how I spend my money is none of your business. And trying to make the most amount of money for yourself is entirely reasonable. As long as you're not doing it at the expense, of someone else. if you're trying to argue with your boss to get a raise, no one would really give you shit about that. They'd be like, good, you should be asserting yourself. You should be trying to get, what you're worth. But if a corporation adds a harmless microtransaction to their game, that's just them being greedy and terrible people. And I think there's a difference. I think that's kind of the same way as just trying to ask for a raise. You're trying to make more money, because they're putting out the product to make money. I don't see anything wrong with that. But, another example, what if you run down the street and rob someone and just steal their money? That's bad. You're basically trying to get more money for yourself, but the way you're doing that, it is in a really bad way. Or, you're selling drugs to people. That's really bad. And the video game equivalent to that would be, selling a $300 trinket that would give you a huge power advantage in PvP, where other people wouldn't be able to compete with you unless you had that trinket, and there is no way to get it except paying $300. That's a bad example. So, I think, it's not completely wrong for them to be mad, how they're getting money or what they're spending it on. But also, at the same time, it's not an all-encompassing thing. There is, degrees to it. It's, what's the word for it? It's complicated. It's more nuanced. Yeah, that's the word for it. It's not so simple and dry as if they put in any microtransaction. They're the greediest people ever who are just stealing from their fan base. It's more like, what are they putting in? And if it gets bad, sure, call them out. If it's not, then your hate towards it is unwarranted and really not worth anything. I also saw a couple of the comments, similar to this. All this to say a point, people would be fine with the cash shop if they knew they were putting the money back into the game in other ways. And it's like, they don't want it to go into the pockets, of the CEOs at the top. And it's always going to be that way. But also, it's none of your business where the money gets spent, and it really shouldn't matter at all. And that's just my own take on it too, because I only say this because I remember, a YouTuber, some people got really mad at him about where he was spending his Patreon money, and how he was spending it on things for himself, buying, a Yu-Gi-Oh statue or something. And it's like, that's the Patreon money they gave you in order, to make more content. And you're spending it on fun stuff for yourself. And it's like, you have no say in what someone spends their money on. And all of these arguments usually just remind me of that. Even if I don't like the practice of CEOs getting all the big money and they fire people at the bottom, it's a terrible business model. Terrible thing that happens in business. I don't really like defending business practices because I think a lot of shitty things happen in the name of business and no one really bats an eye at it. But also, I think, how a business spends their money is really no one's concern unless it's on something like illegal or really bad. And in these cases, they're probably just mad because it's not directly being spent back onto the game. And it's like, a company's trying to make more money. That's what companies do. As long as they're not trying to make it in a really terrible way, it's fine. As long as they're not like Nestle. Nestle is actually an evil company. They've done lots of things. One of them, they try to push formula, baby powder. The stuff you mix with water in order to make baby milk for newborns. What they did was they went to poor villages and they put out propaganda saying that breast milk was bad and that you should have formula instead. And it ended up killing a lot of babies because their tap water wasn't clean. So it was actually better for them to just feed their babies, with breast milk than it was to give them the contaminated tap water with formula. And they ended up killing lots of people because of that. And there's also another time where they cut off a natural spring for another poor village and basically forced them to buy the water back from them. There are companies who are actually evil and do evil things. So, you should hold those kinds of people accountable. But I don't think the things WoW does is anywhere near on the same level as, like, Nestle. So, I don't know. It's kind of a nuanced thing. Like I said, I don't feel good trying to defend how companies spend their money, but also I do kind of understand them just, wanting to make more money because that's kind of their whole thing. So adding in harmless microtransactions to their stores, I think that's fine. Trying to cut off a water source to a poor village and then selling them back, I think that's not fine. So, nuances to it. That's all I really wanted to talk about. The last one with Hearthstone. This isn't about Hearthstone. Hearthstone should add more, heroes you can unlock in game. But they haven't done one in about a year. That's fine. I don't really care. Next comment. I really don't like that you can pay for a level boost. Like, sure, it's fine as a bonus for one character when a new expansion releases. But otherwise, it's like, here, pay $15 a month to play the game. Pay an extra $6 to not play it. Why would you do that? I guess it's a cut down on botting, but it feels like they're incentivizing the ends of people who bought. As long as it's through Blizzard's means. If that makes any sense, people shouldn't be skipping content in general, whether by botting or by purchasing a boost. And I don't like that Blizzard has the option for that. Besides that, I think the cash shop is fine. There are two really good points that people bring up sometimes. One of them is you can use the cash shop in order to buy a level boost, which allows you to skip a large portion of the content. And the other one is you can pay money for gold, which you can then use in game to buy really good pieces of equipment off the auction house for your character. BOEs that drop from raids. Those are two, what I think, are good examples of some of the bad things that can be done with the cash shop. And even then, I don't think either of those things are really that bad. That's why I read this question just to talk about the level boost. The level boost allows you to get up to 110, and you still need to do the last 10 levels yourself, which takes a while. So it's not a full max level character. You still have to go through 10 levels of the current content, which is always the slowest levels to do. So if you no-life it, you can probably do that in a day. The most normal people will take probably about a week to do it if they play it, consistently. And I don't see a problem with that. They still have to level their character. You're just skipping a lot of the boring parts, but you still have to do something. It's not a full skip. So you can't just, buy a brand new max level character and then immediately start gearing them for a raid. If there was a new class that was overpowered and, with how easy it is to gear up a new character, you could just buy a brand new one and then start gearing it up immediately. Instead, there's a little bit of buffer in there. Sure, you can pay to skip a large amount of the content, but you still have to do those last 10 levels on your own, which you can't do quickly. So it really just stops that to the point where it's okay, if you want to do that, you're going to have to do that, before the raid comes out and then get all those alts to level 120. And in that case, it's not really that much of an advantage on other people because you still have to gear them out. And the leveling process, honestly, there's no real advantage to get into 110 immediately. Because leveling itself should just be a fun thing you do. Something you do for fun. That leveling process should be a fun part of the game. And it's not really, a plus to skip it. It shouldn't be. So that's really just there to have people save time. I remember I bought a level boost recently because I started raiding on a new server, and I didn't want to transfer my priest to that server. So instead what I did was just boost a new priest to 110, and then just level up those last 10 levels, on a new server. And I did that instead of transferring, which was actually more expensive than just transferring my priest. But I wanted to play a new race anyway. And I thought, this would be a good chance to do it. And I also needed the priest at max level as soon as possible, because I needed to start gearing it since, when I originally joined that raid team, I joined with my decently geared priest, and I was basically starting over, so I was already at a huge disadvantage, and I needed to get at max level as soon as possible. That way I could start the gear grind. And right now, my new priest that I made like a month or two ago is better geared than my old priest because of just how easy it is to get gear at max level. But it still takes a while. And really, like, skipping all that was more of a convenience, and it didn't really give me any kind of advantages over other people, especially since, you have to do those last 10 levels. I think the argument might change if they have a full max level boost. But as it is now, there is a little bit of limitations on it, and I don't think there is a big advantage to it. It's more of a convenience. But then again, is a convenience an advantage? Cases could be made for that. That's why I say, this is one of those good arguments against it. I don't think it's a very strong argument, but I think it's definitely one that could be argued against, the cash shop in WoW. Even though I have my opinions on it, other people definitely will have different opinions, just like Joey Ratata here. And, the other one, what was it? Buying gold for items? Like, the items you get from the auction house for gold are just kind of like off pieces. You still have to farm out trinkets and Azerite pieces and weapons, I think. I don't know. Sometimes they have weapons. Like, it's just off pieces. It's not the big pieces, but it is still pieces that are pretty good for your pieces of gear. And even then, you're just buying them off the auction house, which other people who don't pay anything can still buy from. So the advantage of that is only really usable for like the first week of a raid, because you can just get, equivalent pieces of gear from the auction house by just raiding normally. So there's no huge advantage, just raiding normally. But there is an advantage for like world first raiding, where you want the best possible gear in every slot as soon as possible. And, that's what Method did. They went to like 2 different auction houses and completely bought out all their BOEs, to get a slighter edge, a bigger advantage. And it definitely gave them a little bit of an advantage. So, cases can be made for that. I don't think it's a big deal. It only affects a very small amount of people, but it does affect those small amounts of people, and it does give them, a little bit of an edge in endgame content. So, that could be something there. Okay, next one. This one is about Idle Heroes. Idle Heroes was a game that I used to play. I was VIP 10. That's crazy. That means you spent tens of thousands of dollars on the game, which you discussed how expensive it is. I'm a pretty sensible person and financially responsible, but the tactics for that game are very underhanded. I spent thousands of dollars over the course of my 1 year playing, to the point where I was financially burdened and hiding that information from my wife. Yeah. I bet, if you're a VIP 10. Games like Idle Heroes create artificial supply limits. They create must-buy-now mentalities, and they make things you buy so incredibly strong as that to be a necessity. Absurd power creep. I am against microtransactions like that. That being said, I have WoW Pets, and I bought through the store, holiday sale. I am also not against microtransactions for the purpose of making cool cosmetic things. I am very much against shady microtransactions that manipulate customers to get money. WoW's microtransactions are not that. I agree with your entire assessment. I have dealt with bad. Blizzard is not bad. Yeah, see, this guy gets it. Someone else put a point like, WoW store isn't bad because there's other things that are worse. And I mean, I get that, saying there's worse things means it's not as bad isn't really a good argument. But it's more like WoW's thing isn't that bad. And here are some things that are actually really bad if you wanted to compare, what is bad to what isn't. And I think that's kind of the case. Like, Idle Heroes is bad. It has a terrible microtransaction thing. It gets people to spend tens of thousands of dollars on it if they want to be competitive, because whenever they release a new hero, it's so overpowered I think one of the new heroes they released recently is so strong that, since it's a team-based game where you have 6 characters on a team, if you have one of those characters at max level against a full team of max level characters, your opponent has, it can solo them easily. Like 1v6, it can beat a full team of max level characters by itself because it's so overpowered. So in order to compete, you need to have one of those guys on your team. And that's idle heroes, and it's really expensive to get heroes to max level, and to give them equipment and stuff like that. And luckily, WoW doesn't do that kind of thing. That's why I use the bad examples to kind of show, like, if WoW ever goes into this direction, then yeah, I'll join you guys and say it's bad. But as currently, it's not. Okay, next one. Absolutely not. ActBlizz is a public company, and putting more microtransactions to the store would be a slippery slope just like the rest of the industry. If you own stock in ActBlizz, you would have invested interest in putting content in the store rather than putting it in the game. Second point is that most WoW players are passionate core gamers, that is, revolting against where the industry is going. So many people have left the game for just how much of a AAA publisher games are as service template WoWs become. Case in point, power creep based on random drops, where everyone is in the middle of the pack. If you then put even more microtransactions to WoW, they'll just say, fuck you, ActBlizz, and find another hobby. I don't really agree with the first part, that it's a slippery slope, because slippery slope itself is a fallacy, and there needs to be some basis for it. Currently, there isn't any basis for the microtransactions getting worse. The second point is interesting, though. He talks about how people as a whole aren't really happy with the gaming industry as a whole. That makes sense. That actually, opened my eyes a little bit. It's like, oh, that kind of explains why people irrationally hate the cash shop so much. It's because, bad microtransactions exist in so many other games in the AAA industry. I was like, oh, that kind of makes sense. I never really thought about it from that point of view, even though I talked about other games with bad microtransactions. That's a good point. Most people just said, like, no. That was easy. Okay. Next one. I don't care that there's a cash shop. The thing that bothers me is when Blizz cares more about their products in their cash shop than the real game. Now that I think about it, I'm mad because the game is not in a good state, and they should address that instead of making some flying pig mount for the cash shop. See, I thought this was another good one, because usually, I want to say people didn't care about the cash shop before, but they absolutely did. It's just nowhere near as much as they do now. Like, whenever they put out a new video for, like, a new cash shop item, like the flying pig, people got really mad, dislike bombed the hell out of it. And I think that's because they believe the game is in a bad state right now. And they think, they're putting out these cash shop items instead of fixing the game. Like, I don't think that's true. I think they hire people specifically to design these things. And if they don't, I guess they take artists away from other projects in order to do it. That's fair. They probably do that. But, they take a couple of artists away, they have them work on a new cash shop item, and they make so much more money to, from that. It's worth it to them. Can't really fault them for that. Is it at the expense of some parts in the game? Probably, to an extent. I wouldn't assume it would be that much, but I don't work in the game industry. I don't know how these things work. If it were me, if I was running it, I would probably just have some of the artists work on it. Be like, you guys work on this cash shop item. It's going to look amazing. The thing is, a lot of the mounts in-game themselves also look good. So, I would assume they put more effort into the cash shop items, though, because those ones, I would also assume make them a lot of money for not too much effort. Anyways, that was a detractor. That wasn't really part of what this guy's talking about. I think this one is a pretty good example of why people hate it so much now, and that's because they believe the game is in a bad state. And so, of course, they're already mad at Blizzard for what the company has done, and they're mad at the game not being as good as they want it to be. So, if they put out cash shop items, they just see it as a symptom of bad game companies and immediately reject it. Even if it in itself is pretty harmless, since you can get the flying pig mount off with real game gold. With gold, you can get it in game if you want. I remember when I bought the pig mount and I was flying it on a stream, I had so many people who took offense to the fact that I had the pig mount. They didn't like it, and I had so many people continuously comment throughout the entire stream because I was using it the whole time, who were not pleased with the fact that I own that thing. And I can kind of understand it from this angle. They want them to put those resources into fixing the game and not adding more cash shop things, which is an emotional-based argument. And, we are emotional creatures. You can't really discount it too much. It's a good way to explain why people are mad. Anything on the WoW store has never been required content. I love the WoW token because it prevents people from RMTing or botting. Yeah, how about we talk about some of the good sides to the WoW token? It significantly cuts down on botting. Doesn't eliminate it, though. That's still there. And it cuts down on real money trading. It's still there. But, why would you hand over, the risk of getting your account banned, buying gold from a third-party site, when you can just buy gold through, the in-game shop instead? So much easier. You don't have to risk anything. And, people are doing it anyway. So, it gives them another avenue towards that. And I think that's actually a pretty good part of it. Okay. And that's it. Like I say with most of these comment response videos, I'm not going to make a comment response to these comments. I don't do a comments response to the comment response. So, that's it. Good discussion. Opened my eyes to some different viewpoints I didn't even notice, but are very obvious in hindsight now. Until next week when I have a new discussion topic.